This is fairly typical for a Data East power supply. As these caps get older, they leak and damage the power supply, as you can see here. C2 is the normally higher probability offender, but in this case, the 1000 microfarad at C1 is also leaked. And I took C3 off so I could get to all this, and I'll replace that also. C7 over here almost always leaks too, and this one just started. So you got to make sure you clean up those traces. And I like to use this fiberglass pencil to make sure I clean up the traces, and I'll use some isopropyl alcohol to clean all that up. But I also wanted to show you that these two rectifying diodes here, you can see the legs of those have been impacted, and the corrosion from C2 almost always eats over into these. So I'm going to show you the absolute easiest way to remove these diodes. And so the first thing is get yourself a pair of sharp side cutters. I love these Exolite ones. They're kind of expensive, but I love them. And just cut the parts right off the board. Now, don't damage the traces as you're doing it. Okay, so we've got those off. And then we're going to flip the board over. I've done this many times, so I know exactly where those diodes are. And what you do is just get another pair of side cutters. This is an older one. And heat the hole up. Pull that part right out. Spank it off the side cutters. Turn it around so you can get at the other part. And then we're going to clean up those holes with our Taco solder sucker or whatever you prefer. But it's much easier to get those parts off the board by just clipping them off and then grab the legs out just like I did and then clean up the holes. If you try to do that with your Taco solder sucker, you're just going to pull these traces, especially these through holes that don't have a trace attached to them here. These are very fragile on these boards. So let's reinstall what we need to. So this is interesting. This is the same power supply, and I've already replaced the 330 microfarad cap here and this 104 ceramic capacitor here. So I was in the process of cleaning up this area, and it's a pretty tight area. So what I have to do that is one of these. This is a light socket cleaner stick that you can get from Steve Young at Pinball Resource. And it's pretty abrasive, and it does a nice job of cleaning up the traces. And then, of course, I can use the fiberglass pencil to get in there and do sort of final cleanup on that. But what you can see is the electrolyte leaked from the cap, and between the positive side and the negative side, it created a carbon path to short across those two leads. Now that should be open. There should be no conductivity between those. So let's see how conductive carbon is. So I've got my Fluke 179 here set to resistance, and I'm gonna touch the carbon to see what we've got. So you got about 2.34 million ohms of resistance there, and it should be nothing, so we're not going to let that persist. So what I'll end up doing is I'm going to take a Dremel with a ball cutter on there. I'm going to slice across here and sever the path that the carbon has worn into this PCB. Be right back. So I've used my Dremel with my ball cutter on it to eliminate all the carbon that had built up between these two. And now if I measure resistance between this trace and where the carbon was, it's open as it should be. So that's a good thing to do. We need to make sure that we don't have any current leaks across positive and ground. Now I'm going to repopulate the board. So here we are with this power supply, and this is probably the worst corroded power supply I've ever seen. It got underneath some of the 47 microfarad caps that are usually right here, so I took those out and installed a big 18,000 instead. So let's power it up. And the GI is turning on correctly, and this is a little device I made to test the GI relay. So that is working properly. So now let's test some voltages. The minus 12, good. Plus 12, good. 5, good. Now I'm going to switch hands here, and we'll go over here to the high voltages. I've got these connector housings on here so they don't short the pins together. Minus 89, that seems low, but that's good while the power supply is unloaded. 65, sorry, minus 89, minus 111, 65, that's good. Here's our 12 again. This is 5 again. All right, so I'm going to skip down here. We got minus 12, 12, nothing there, another 12. Now we're going to get into the 5s. Yeah, so we are good to go here. These pins out here are all ground pins. So this power supply, as problematic as it was, had corrosion even underneath these 220 microfarad caps, is now ready to go. Good riddance to this one.